I have the pleasure of being with Dr. Rick Hanson today on Mindrolling, and this wonderful new book that you have written, Rick. I mean, it's maybe 10 podcasts we would get at all the material, and so much of it is so absolutely relevant to what's going on here with this pandemic and so on, and people's reactions to it. And so I'm really quite happy to be talking to you today about it. It's called Neurodharma. That's a beautiful coined phrase. How did you get to that? I mean,
well, for me, it's like there are two ways of knowing ourselves and helping ourselves, from the inside out and the outside in. Inside out, that's the Dharma part, truth. Really, it's my nod to the perennial wisdom of the ages. And then there's the outside in, objective, third-person perspective of science, especially modern neurobiology, which is another way to know ourselves. And obviously, the Buddha did not need an MRI to become awakened, and nor do many other people, right? On the other hand, wow, to me, it's so honoring of the Buddha's teachings, and more broadly appreciating underlying causes and conditions, and really being truly embodied, really grounding mind in life, whatever may lie transcendentally beyond or distinct from ordinary conditioned reality. Otherwise, the experiences of a squirrel or a cat or a human are based on or grounded in, as a cause and condition, what's happening in the body. So to be able to start tapping into what's going on inside the coconut, right? The 3 pounds of tofu inside the head.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, that's it. It just seems so useful. And plus, it's so cool, right? It's so like, wow, what's going on in there?
Yeah, and it's all here for us.
Yeah.
We don't have to go anywhere.
That's right.
Now, before we even talk about this and a little bit about you, I have to bring up the book that you wrote, on resilience. Right? I can't remember. What's the title of that book?
Yeah, Resilient, as
Just
who we become.
Resilient,
yeah.
I'm finding this is such an extraordinarily important attribute for us to cultivate now. I've had a lot of thoughts around it over this last year, made a lot of big changes in my life, and I can't tell you how many times I would say, boy, this got to build up some resilience here. I find myself losing contact with that calmer, deeper place that I'm a little bit used to after, all these years. I don't know if I think maybe that I went back to India with Ram Dass, second time he went back.
No, I didn't know that. Oh, cool.
And so that's where I met, out of all of that, met Sharon and Jack and Joseph, well, Joseph in particular. And so I was a little bit taken aback, by the affront that is happening to all of us and the importance of resilience. Can you just talk about that a little bit? Because I think it's so, it's certainly part of everything that you're talking about with, Neurodharma, but give us a little bit of a hand there on the resilience building.
Well, you're naming such an important thing. In the Buddhist tradition, which is the one I most know, so it's the one I'm going to speak to, but not because I'm trying to pitch it or something, but, equanimity, upekkha in Pali, right? I bet there's a Sanskrit, close cousin to upekkha. Just the capacity, as people say, to walk evenly over uneven ground. Or I love this phrase from Howard Thurman, the African-American minister in L.A., looking out upon the world with quiet eyes, no matter how noisy the world gets. Yeah. So how do we get that kind of resilience? Well, it's grounded in psychological resources of various kinds, grit, gratitude, core of underlying well-being, compassion, and so forth. So we grow those. I think that one of the takeaways from this time for a lot of us is to redouble our personal practice. I find for myself that I'm motivated to practice when I'm feeling at my worst or my best, or the world is at its worst or at its best. It's interesting to appreciate how it's also when we feel at our best or the world's at our best that we kind of look at it and go, is this it? Right. And then that moves us to practice. So, though obviously we're moved to practice when, the oatmeal's really hitting the fan. So I could talk about it and blather on a lot, but I'll just pause there. What do you make of all that? What do you draw on to grow resilience in yourself?
Well, similarly, and certainly mindfulness is so important. It allows us to really be able to see more clearly causes and conditions and be a little bit compassionate towards. So working, Sharon's loving kindness meditations are really effective. Or more recently, Ram Dass coined loving awareness. Very similar. And what are the things I find that have connected me on an immediate basis as soon as I feel this loss of being able to respond in a way that's intelligent rather than in the knee-jerk reaction that we humans seem to be really, we lean towards, which is avoidance.
Yeah.
Right. And so I find nurturing that part, which is more intelligent, and looking and being more accepting. And in this new book, you talk a lot about that, and that's really important. But for everybody out there, the ability to just find that place in oneself that has all of the natural inclinations to be okay with suffering, okay with uncertainty. These are for me, this is what makes up resilience.
I find, I agree with all that. And it's kind of weird to say it. So I have a lot of background in wilderness, in rock climbing in the mountains, including in really severe conditions sometimes. And I find that the body memory of what I drew on and grew inside to get through those times, is really kind of moving to the forefront. And it might sound sort of morbid, but I've thought recently about a book I read a while ago because I like survival stories. Who lives, who dies? That's the title of the book. Yeah. And the people who live usually are the ones who can, as you were saying, in a sense, kind of find some calm, find some strength, find their footing in the middle of it all, rather than being overwhelmed by it. And I'd say for myself that lately, I've just been really drawn into two things that seem weirdly effective. One is where you just sort of feel like you're kind of opening out into everything that is. It sounds woo-woo, but you just realize this is a big thing, right? There's a lot going on here, a lot of factors. It's sort of like, in a sense, the fullness, emptiness place combined, where and you could do it in your body. You could feel the left side of your body, the right side of your body, then left and right together. And then you can just sort of open out. There's something really calming about that. And so part of the book involves what could be going on in the brain underneath it all, that those practices of wholeness and allness are so effective. So I find that really helpful to me, just to see the bigger picture, to put it in perspective, to kind of open out into all that. And the other thing that personally I draw on is this freaking scruffy, gritty, I'm going to get through this. This ain't going to kill me, right? This ain't going to kill the people I care about. And don't be an asshole, with that kind of scruffy, gritty quality. But that sort of moxie, maybe has a little fieriness to it, but also within it, patience. One of the paramis, right? Of course, one of the perfections, patience. It sounds like such a homely virtue, and yet it's so fundamental, it's so profound, just to endure, right? I will still be here after this storm passes. Might be a little battered by it, but I'm going to be here still.
You were just, that grit that you're talking about reminds me, and sorry everybody out there listening, I've told this story quite a few times, but this particular quality is super important, and Rick is saying it, and he's saying it in a different way. And it's a story that Krishna Das, I think you know who Krishna Das is.
Yeah. I listened to him routinely.
And so one day he was with our guru, Neem Karoli Baba, and they were with another Indian man in Mumbai, actually. And suddenly Maharaji goes to Krishnadas, courage is a very important thing. Something like that, right? Courage. And the Indian man said, no, what are we talking about? You know, we're in the tradition of bhakti yoga, right? Yoga of devotion. He says, no, the guru kripa, guru's grace. No, it's just all about grace of the guru. You know, he's telling Neem Karoli Baba this, and he turns, Neem Karoli Baba turns back to Krishnadas and points his finger again and says, courage is a very important thing. He completely dismissed this other thing. Now, you know, Krishnadas said at that point, he was telling the story a few years ago, for the rest of my life, I had that as something to draw from. And whoever's heard this story is you know, it's very, very important part of, and look what's going on right now. You know, I mean, it's grit. Got to be a little bit of grit, and that falls back for me to resilience, right?
Exactly. And
that.
courage, like heart.
Yeah,
that's another thing. To take heart, to have heart. I wrote a thing recently about getting through all this, and one of the parts of it had to do with taking heart in all the frontline people, all the people pushing brooms in hospitals at 2 a.m, you know, all the people driving buses today at great risk to themselves. Everyone around the world, all the parents at home with their kids now trying to both work at home while helping their kid get through 4th grade or 10th grade, et cetera. Take heart. We can take heart in Sangha, in a sense, the community altogether. So to me, courage, you know, the root of it obviously is heart and so on. That's an aspect of courage, is to take heart in the efforts of other people.
Yeah. And I think we should say this is not a matter of courage coming from here, from the ego, mind, right? It is not that. It is the heart.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I think that's real important. So, how about a little bit about you? I mean, I always like to know when I'm talking to somebody. You grew up, and you talk about it in the book, as you grew up in a very relaxed family, shall we say? I don't know if that's the right word for it, and you at some point started looking around and going, geez, what the heck is going on here? You know, it's funny because do you know who Adyashanti is?
Oh, yeah, very much. Again, much respect for him.
Yeah, much respect for him. I talked to him at one point, and he said a very similar thing. He said, I just couldn't understand what the heck was going on with these adults, the way that they behaved and the emotions and out of sorts and anger and all of the, you know. And he said it wasn't until I was, I think he said 8 or 9 or something, when he had a little bit more formed wisdom, shall we say, or understanding more than wisdom. And he said to himself, I know what's going on. These people believe their thoughts, you know. They're just reacting to anything that they think, you know, which led him into a meditative path when he was a teenager. So I think there's some similar kind of thing there. But talk about, growing up and what happened to lead you where you are now. Or just to understand there was a path.
Deep question. I think for a lot of people, so as you know, I'm a psychologist, psychotherapist, and sometimes I plumb the depths of people's childhoods with them. And, you know, and I've worked a lot with kids, and we've raised 2 kids to adulthood now. And I think that we underestimate what kids know. They can't put it into words, but we knew stuff. So I can say that in my earliest memories, that include a fair amount of sort of turmoil around me in a kind of C- situation I grew up in. Not traumatic, far from relaxed. It was the opposite of relaxed. There was a lot of tension, partly generational from my parents' upbringing in the Great Depression, for different reasons. And in my awareness as a little kid was this sense of a lot of unnecessary unhappiness, a lot of low-grade but chronic bickering, hassle, fault-finding, finger-pointing, tension. and also in the kids around me, up at the grown-ups and then grown-ups and kids and so on. And I didn't know why it was, but I knew it was just like, there was this background intuition somehow. It doesn't have to be like this. And then that led me on my way. I didn't know what to do about it. By the time I went off to college, I was young through school, I really dove into the human potential movement in the early 70s, late 60s at UCLA. And that kind of set me on my way. I started meditating in 1974. I'd grown up as a casual Methodist, completely ordinary. I had a teacher, Adi Da, for a while, and he talked about sort of downtown religion. Yeah, just very conventional, well-intended, but there wasn't much juice there. And so when I started meditating in 74, and I became, I guess, most drawn to the penetrating simplicity and clarity of the Buddhist teachings. They seemed very right at the heart of it all, extracted from, particularly from, in a good translation, from a lot of cultural complexity, just kaboom. Just like you said early, it's here right now. This moment of hearing, seeing, tasting, wanting, loving, hating, ba-boom. What's the nature of the experience we're having right now? Not just what are we experiencing, but what is the nature of what we're experiencing and our relationship to it. Whew. That totally set me on my way. That's where it really kind of started for me.
So, and the big word for me in what you just said, intuitive knowing.
Yeah.
Right. I think I can't tell you how many times we've talked about it in different retreats that we have done before Ram Dass passed and are doing now since his leaving, about trust. One, you connect with that intuitive knowing.
Yeah.
And then you have a trust that develops. And through that trust, you can put one foot in front of the other. Without that trust, one can get a little bit lost. So intuition to me, connecting with that is super important. And I guess I did so myself at that time. We have similar backgrounds. I think I had a little bit more of a fierce one than you, but that's my subjectivity, with a dominant father, a tyrannical father, who followed me to India, and Neem Karoli Baba, got me to give him acid. How about that? And it dynamited him, and then we had a relationship for the rest of our lives. It's a whole great story.
That's one way to do it.
Yeah. I couldn't believe it, but yeah, that trust is super, super important. And so
can I go back to that though? Just what you said there. So as a therapist, you just reminded me of something. I think that as kids, many kids have this fateful choice that was sort of implied in what you said about Adyashanti, in which they either think that they're crazy or the adults are crazy.
Yeah.
And most kids make the understandable but wrong choice that they decide that they're crazy because that enables them to maintain a kind of attachment relationship. And I think what that gets at is, how do we claim that intuitive knowing that no, they're crazy, no, they're sweet, they're well-intended, they're not evil, and whoa, not me, not mine, right? And I can say that one of the fundamental saving graces of my life is that by the time I was 6, I knew it wasn't me. I still had to deal with a lot of crud. I accumulated many feelings of inadequacy and worthlessness, loneliness. I was deeply awkward and then neurotic, right? But at some level, there was a knowing of what was actually true. So this goes into courage, right? How do we find the courage? I felt it's very central for many people to claim what we really know in our bones to be true. Because it can be really scary to claim that. You can feel alienated from others. If you reveal what you really know and feel to be true, they're going to crush you like a bug, right? It takes courage to really claim what you know to be true in your belly.
Yeah. And many people do get crushed, terribly crushed. And you have probably treated many, many people with this particular trauma. And so, again, trusting in that deep inner knowing is crucial. I mean, in terms of anybody I've seen and myself, never mind
And having
anybody
the
else.
courage to trust in it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Let me just read something from the book that gives us all an idea. Every sensation, every thought and desire, and every moment of awareness is being shaped by 3 pounds of tofu-like tissue. I love that. Inside your head. It's a great. I don't know if I'll ever be able to eat tofu again, Rick. The stream of consciousness involves a stream of information in a stream of neural activity. The mind is a natural phenomenon that is grounded in life. Major causes of both suffering and its end are rooted in your own body. Goes back to, it is all here. We can do something about this. So, that's kind of a central premise for what you're talking about in this book. I think since we're talking a little bit about youngsters and growing up, and there's one of the chapters is when you were young, and it's about how the vulnerability of us all in those first few years, and the primal experiences, which are neural triggers for experiences of stress and fear. The I could never pronounce it. You got to pronounce it.
Amygdala?
Amygdala is fully formed before most
It sounds like
babies
from India. Come on, you can do it. Come on, do it. Like amygdala.
I don't speak Hindi that well now. Okay. So, let's talk about that, because that seems to be, I mean, this is something I've really been working on over the last few years, just the ways in which we really, the causes and conditions, and as far as I believe, not just this life, but what we bring in from past lives that we need to work out through karmic eventuality, that these things are so sticky and penetrated to the deepest part of our bones almost, that it is very tough to really A, understand, and B, transform. Can you talk about just some of the realities of scientifically what is happening that forms these, the fear, the painful emotions, the threats, all of it, and then we start to go, no.
Oh yeah. Well, deep. So, as kind of a frame, personally, I do think that there are supernatural matters that might include reincarnation, discarnate beings, just supernatural matters, as well as something ultimately transcendental. That said, clearly inside what people call the natural frame, which was the frame of reference that was in the sentences that you just read there, inside that frame. So I'm not trying to say this is all there is necessarily, but certainly it's a lot of what is. Okay. So in terms of what's happening in the tofu, it's being sculpted in effect, literally physically by our experiences. There's this classic saying from the work of the Canadian psychologist Donald Hebb: neurons that wire together. Has a kind of rhythm to it, right? I want to see a rap musical, organized around that. But anyway, and so the bottom line is that if you watch kids learn to walk instead of crawl, or adults learn to be more patient, or become traumatized, right? As there are changes in mind, there must be changes in brain. By mind, I simply mean the totality of our experiencing, perhaps the smallest of which is intellect. Okay, it's the totality of our consciousness. There must be underlying changes in our bodies, most of which are really inside the brain. So our experiences when we're young affect us intensely. If you said, to put it a certain way, we're designed to be changed by our experiences, especially negative ones in childhood, and especially negative ones in childhood that involve other people. We are designed to learn from those experiences, and it's no wonder that we're affected. People say, "Oh, why don't you get over it? It was, your childhood." Well,
Yeah.
that's the hardest thing to get over of all. That said, with bhavana, with cultivation, we can gradually shift our relationship to our reactions. They still arise, but we're not so identified with them. We're less hijacked by them. We recover to that resilient well-being baseline faster. And then over time, more and more, the triggers occur and they don't move the needle so much. And eventually, they don't move the needle at all. And I'm really interested myself in that process of cultivation. I mean, if I actually could have written a different title, it would have been Neurobhavana, the
Yeah.
process actually
Yep.
of how cultivation really proceeds and how we can help it really happen inside us. But it's very hopeful. On the one hand, there's compassion for our suffering and how we're understandably really affected by our experiences. We're designed to be physically affected by them. And on the other hand, it's really hopeful that we can help ourselves grow a little and let go a little and become a little wiser, a little happier every day.
Yeah. And you say in the brain, trauma. You have some nice little turns of phrases here, Rick. In the brain, trauma and ordinary neurotic crud. What's ordinary are embedded in neural circuitry, which takes time to alter. Developing happiness, emotional intelligence, and a loving heart also requires gradual physical changes. What are we talking about there?
So kind of a quick summary. You're talking about new connections forming among the 85 billion or so neurons inside our head. Talking about existing connections getting stronger or weaker based upon, let's suppose that a person wants to become calmer and stronger and more contented over time, which I do, right? I'm still kind of on the path myself. That process of calm and contentment and compassion, let's say, not too bad, the big three, right? That involves actual changes in the brain, and increasingly scientists are measuring those in terms of less reactivity in certain ways and greater resourcefulness in other ways. Another thing that happens is you start shifting ebbs and flows of neurotransmitters, less dopamine, let's say, that rewards us for addictive craving, and more, let's say, oxytocin or natural opioids that support the felt sense of heartfelt contentment already. That changes. You also get changes in gene expression. And I don't know if you know this part. Scientists are now discovering, literally, the ways in which the experiences of one generation changes the expression of genes in the second generation, independent of upbringing or other factors, particularly identified with invasive studies on rats and other animals, but you can find this in humans as well. And then those changes of expression can be passed down to the third generation based on the experiences of grandparents, which has a lot of implications for generational trauma in populations like, in America, people of color, Jews, clearly, who are carrying literally the impacts of the experiences their great-grandparents have had. These are not changes in the genes specifically, but in the expression of genes. For example, people who are highly stressed tend to have children who are less able to express genes that calm down the stress response. Through literally that epigenetic pathway, the next generation gets more reactive, and then when they have kids, they can pass along that sensitivity to reactivity to their own children. So, one way I think about all this is we practice for others too, in lots of ways, including generationally.
Oh, okay. That is not something that I have been aware of, and that's a fantastic promise, really, or a fantastic possibility or reality, obviously, that what we are doing is not just for little me to get better. That's really wonderful. Wow.
It is really cool. And it's one of the many aspects of the ways in which I think, though I call it, practicing with the brain and mind, in effect, that we just take it into account. And one of the benefits of this is that it's motivating. Motivating for practice, right? Yep. When you know that you're actually physically changing the hardware, suddenly it seems more real, especially for some people.
It's a bit of the bodhisattva vow, engaging in, I am not going to leave until everyone is free of suffering. And you start to, if you this is something to realize, and as you say, a motivating factor, actually is very enheartening. I mean, it's a fabulous, fabulous thing. So now you've done all this work. I think it's great to maybe understand a little bit, not to get too much into the weeds of the science of this, but am I correct? It is possible to change those pathways, right?
Yeah.
So that it in effect actually it's not a pie in the sky thing. That when you actually do the kind of work that is being suggested in your book here, that there is a change. This is not, maybe. Talk about that. I mean, it's a reality.
Yeah. There's a lot about this. So one part is that we are surrounded by evidence of mental change of people's mind and heart, and like how they experience things, how they are, how they feel. There's tons of research on formal interventions like psychotherapy or mindfulness training or self-compassion training, gratitude training. There's a lot of research on that. Plus, we're surrounded by examples of other people we've known who over time have become less of an asshole. Let's say, like my father, he was well-intended. He grew up on a ranch in North Dakota. He became a scientist, and raising me, he was pretty uptight and anxious and controlling and worried and so forth. He definitely changed as he got older. And I still remember him in his 90s hooking up with this hot young lady who was in her 80s, and at some point in that relationship, he said, "Hey, Rick, I think she and I ought to go to therapy." So, and that was the last thing from his own background he would ever think about. So we're surrounded by this evidence. Well, if the mental changes are evidence of neural changes, we don't need an MRI to know that. We don't need an EEG to know that, because otherwise we're left with magic. So if there are changes in a person's psychology, they're becoming more patient over time, more mindful over time, more loving over time, there must be underlying changes in the body. Part one. Part two, these days increasingly, with invasive studies on non-human animals, flagging the ethical issues there, and then not invasive studies on college sophomores, the great guinea pigs, right, of social science. You can observe with imaging technology physical changes occurring in the brain within minutes based on the experiences people are having. And over longer periods of time, maybe I'll summarize for you, like 4 major changes in the brains of people who are kind of longtime meditators. They don't have to be monks or nuns doing it all the time, but just, kind of mindfulness meditators loosely. Detail, there's a lot of overlap between different kinds of meditation, different kinds of practice, but there's also some differences, and you can find these differences even in the brains of people who do different forms of practice, which is pretty interesting. But let's just kind of keep it simple at the core of it. 4 major changes in the brain of people who, practice, kind of sloppy, realistic practice, 20 minutes here, skip a day, 40 minutes there. Yeah.
I'm a day-to-day sloppy, but okay.
Yeah, the 1 minute meditator. So really quickly here, 1, greater control over attention. Understandably, neurons that fire together wire together. You work that muscle of regulating your attention, returning your awareness, refocusing. You literally strengthen neural circuitry that regulates attention, mainly right behind the forehead, the prefrontal areas that do that. All right. Second, body awareness, much more awareness of the body. So parts of the body, especially it's called the insula. We have 2 of them. It's a part of the brain. That's what we draw upon when we tune into our gut feelings and we tune into our bodies. As a interesting and useful little detail, as people deepen in body awareness, and literally their insula gets thicker because there's more connections among neurons and also more capillaries bringing blood to the insula. You're working the muscle, it literally gets bigger. People become more empathic for others as they deepen in their awareness of their own bodies. That's a good benefit. Third, emotional regulation. There's a greater regulation of the amygdala, the alarm bell of the brain, and increased circuits, as it were, in nearby region called the hippocampus that calms down the alarm bell, puts things in perspective, as well as other things going on in the brain that help us stay more resilient, stay calmer, and more rested in positive well-being. And last, the sense of self. There's less activity in the default mode network where there's a lot of sense of me, myself, and I, my precious, right?
Yes.
And there's more of this kind of activation that's more global, that's more holistic. You feel like a person as a being process, but less of a sense of, me.
Mini me.
My.
I call it mini me.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, those are 4 major changes that are really found reliably, that in which there's underlying structural and functional change in the brain that supports those changes of mind.
Now, as you were talking about your father just earlier, and he was 85, 90, whatever, met, sweet young woman. And I mean, that is so much my father. I can't even tell you. I mean, we must have similar things going on there. But I will say, in my father's case, he needed that magic that he got from Neuroscience.
The magic pill, and the Shaktipat.
Then boink. So just so everybody knows, this book is chock full of very, very helpful practices. This isn't just a pedantic, this is what, neuroscience says. This is, okay, get down and do it. And
thank you. That's really true.
Yeah. And something that that's a major obvious premise in terms of the get down and doing it is letting be, letting go, and letting in. So give us a little of that, Rick, because I think that's the modus operandi here for people to change these traits that we are so stuck on.
It's really great that you're zeroing in on the heart of the matter. I mean, I really appreciate it that you've done that, And so for me, that framework you just said is so useful because it summarizes how to practice. Like I'm a practice guy. Yeah. I mean, I love the science. It's so interesting. But at the end of the day, to me, it's about practice. What are we going to do, right? To be a little less miserable at the end of the day than when we started.
And a little bit kinder as well.
Yeah, exactamundo. So how do we practice, right? And primary mode of practice is to be with what's there. We feel the feelings, we experience the experience, maybe we explore it, maybe we sense into what's younger and more vulnerable under the surface, like hurt beneath anger. Maybe we have insight, vipassana, into the nature of the experience we're having. In the process of that, sometimes what we're experiencing changes. The unhappiness eases, the reactivity eases, the addictive craving maybe passes away. But we're not directly trying to nudge it. We're not making efforts in our mind to nudge our experience one way or another. I think that's the primary mode of practice. It's sometimes all we can do, just ride out the storm, bear the pain. And as our practice matures, you see this in people who are very far along, they're more and more, they're just resting in being with what's arising as it passes away radically and continuously with a whole heart. But it's not the only form of practice, and I think it's gotten overvalued. I think it's become almost dogmatic and ideological in some quarters, like just witness the stream of consciousness, that's all you have to do. Just keep noting, just keep witnessing, just keep witnessing. I don't think that's what the great teachers teach, and I don't think that's what modern science tells us about the way the brain actually changes over time. We need to work with the mind, not just be with the mind. And so working with the mind involves the 2 aspects of wise effort, really, where we're letting go, We're releasing tension from the body. We're letting go of thoughts. We're disidentifying from our reactive patterns. We're abandoning unwholesome desires and so forth. And we're letting in. We're cultivating bhavana. We're cultivating resilience and grit and wisdom and happiness along the way. I think of it like a garden. You can witness the garden, pull weeds, plant flowers. I tend to focus on the flower planting because I think it's been the forgotten stepchild of a lot of clinical psychology and a fair amount of spiritual practice. It's really important to focus on it. How do you actually move from states to traits? How do you actually develop positive traits hardwired into you that are not dependent upon your conditions, your settings? One of the great teachings, I think, of this pandemic time is that many of us have been just sort of propped up by our activities and interactions and experiences. And when the music stops playing, you're left with whatever traits you've developed inside. That's what you can really draw upon. And for some people, it looks like an empty cupboard. Yeah. It's like, okay, I got to start cultivating. Yeah. Anyway, but for me, the cultivation part, just to finish, is in that larger context. It's not about positive thinking. It's not about rose-colored glasses. Actually, it's based on a kind of scruffy clarity that life sometimes sucks. And for some people, it sucks all the time, really. And the more it sucks, the more important it is to look for ways to grow the good inside, right? For your own sake and the sake of others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was very, we talked about and how heartening it felt when you started talking about the work that you do on yourself and how that can have such profound results generationally is extraordinary. And that starts to make you think about, gee, maybe it's not just a me thing all the time. We have this subjectively wonderful, because I produced it, a movie that came out of Ram Dass called Becoming Nobody, right?
You produced that. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Thank you.
And by the way, I have much gratitude and respect for Ram Dass, blessings on his name. Yeah.
But my favorite part in the whole movie, okay, and there's great stuff about identity, how, the causes and conditions around identity and roles and all of that, and moving out of that. And then he suddenly says, and again, I'm repeating to everybody out there, when is what I want enough? When is what I need enough? It's much more interesting to think about others, think about service, right? And it also makes me think of His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. Kindness is my only religion. And you have a section in here, compassion and kindness. And very simply, you say, compassion is wishing that beings not suffer, and kindness is wishing that they be happy. Bob Thurman once, I think
yes.
Bob, at a retreat, he talked about the definition of love is the wish that all beings be happy. And as wishes, these are, you say, as wishes, these are, so we're going into something else here, which I think is really important. Yeah. As wishes, these are forms of desire, right? Nasty word.
Yeah,
okay, desire. Right. Got to get rid of that, which, as you say, which raises an important question that we should address. Is desire okay?
Talk about that. That's great stuff. Well, yeah so, wow, so much about that. Part of what's there in the book, even though I'm, maybe my persona especially has a certain nice Midwestern cultural edge to it, there's a part of the book that honestly is a pushback against certain, in my view, problematic attitudes and just finger waving from some people in some quarters that I just think is wrong. So, for example, desire per se is not the problem. It's what kind of desire, pursued in what kind of ways, with what kind of attachment to the results. That's kind of the crux of the matter. And obviously, wanting children to be fed is a wholesome desire. And I think it's okay to have values. I mean, in the ultimate, right, it's beyond good and bad, beyond right and wrong, blah, blah. That said, hello, even trying to not have values is a value. There's just no way around it. So that's part of embodiment to me. That's part of just inhabiting our animal realness, in which, of course, we want to be fed. And throughout the architecture of the body, even down at the cellular level, there are goals, there are aims, right? So there, in Pali, the language of early Buddhism, there's tanha, which is the word for craving, and the second noble truth, as you probably know, and its root meaning is thirst. So in that form of desire, there's an underlying sense of something missing, something wrong. On the other hand, there's wholesome desire, chanda, which is grounded in a sense of enoughness already, fundamentally. It's not based on a drive state, right? Craving is a drive state in neuropsychological terms. So how do we disengage from drive states while still dreaming big dreams, speaking truth to power, and howling at the moon on a Friday night with friends, right? So to me, that's the key distinction, really. And one of the, for me, under-investigated ideas in the Dharma broadly, in the spiritual traditions, is what really is the source of craving, right? People can accept, it's almost like a needlepoint sampler on the wall. Ooh, suffering arises dependent upon craving, but they never go to the next step, which is upon what does craving arise, especially in an embodied way. So one of the things I've personally, making it personal now, have found is so really interesting is to listen to the longings in your heart, actually, not push them away. Much like it's important to not have the courage to not push away what you know to be true, to not push away the deep longings and to actually satisfy them. But really make sure when you do that you feel it. So you internalize the satisfaction of those longings. So gradually you satisfy those hungers for love, for connection, for a sense of accomplishment, a sense of efficacy, agency. You can actually make things happen. You satisfy them through having and then especially internalizing wholesome, beneficial experiences. So more and more, you feel already full from the inside out. And underlying embodied hormonal, neurological causes of craving gradually fall away. You feel already contented as the next moment lands. And that's been really important for me, including dealing with my sense of worthlessness as a kid, to actually let myself reach for, we call them narcissistic supplies, right? And to help myself, like, okay, you like me. Oh, tell me more. But not like a junkie getting a fix. So you need another fix the next day, but to truly be vulnerable and intimate enough with that experience to really receive it into yourself. So over time, that hunger falls away.
Crucial stuff, as far as I'm concerned. And I'm so glad you brought this up in the book and otherwise here. It's just too much of the spiritual bypass that happens.
Yeah.
It just, so many of us at one time in our lives have done this, thinking we need to be something that's pure, that's unadulterated, that's unaffected, and we presuppose something that's not human, you know, and to include desire in this case. Yes, I want to be kind, I want to be compassionate, I want to be loving. It makes all the sense in the world, and why should you not? And then to take it further, as you just did, realizing our humanness and realizing that, yes, we want to fulfill this, that, or the other. Obviously, as you say, it's not about being a junkie and getting lost in it. It's a matter of having awareness around it. So I really love that. And that gets to another attribute that is, to me, extraordinarily important. In fact, we did a whole retreat on it, generosity, because it just takes you. It's like serving, as Ram Dass said. It's much more interesting to serve. Once you do that, you stop being completely embedded in this mini me self-referential, I love the Tibetan, self-cherishing kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
Generosity and service, they fit together, and this is something that is so lacking in this world right now. I think that we're all approaching it a little bit differently now with COVID.
Yeah.
Because you can't help, you see people going and feeding other people that can't get food, can't even go out from the fear and shouldn't be going out, and so on. So this is, this is something I found. Somebody wrote this beautiful thing around this. The Chinese call this kind of chaos and uncertainty a dangerous opportunity. Isn't that great? And so, but I do feel, right, generosity has so many layers of importance in terms of everybody we are around, who we are, and that generosity for ourselves. And you do talk about that in the book as well, talking about compassion for ourselves and so on.
Yeah. Yeah. There are a couple parts of it. One is, kind of a weird, well, here we are, you and I. What are we? We're like two big freaking male monkeys, really. And it's really easy to lose sight of the ways in which humans are really strange in many ways, including both in the worst of us and the best of us. And one of those best parts is the ways in which our species has evolved very strong inclinations and capacities for altruism, for generosity, including for those who are not our own. Right? You in a narrow way, our closest cousins, the chimpanzees or bonobos, will, a mother will feed her child. She will not feed another monkey child, basically. Maybe there will be a little sharing of food after, the big dogs, the big monkeys have eaten, but very, very little. Definitely not helping others from another band, let's say. Humans will jump into a river to risk their life to save someone else's dog that they don't know. Yeah. Complete stranger dog. People during the Holocaust would shelter at enormous personal peril, complete strangers for months, if not years at a time. And so what is that? It's really quite profound. So I have a feeling myself in my body. I mean, it's one thing to know this intellectually, but then you want to bring it down to the body. I have a friend, Samuel Bonder, non-dual teacher, talks about waking down, not just waking up, to feel it in the body, this movement of generosity, really, really deep. And then the question is, who are we leaving out? Who are we leaving out of that circle of generosity? And very often it's ourselves. Yeah. We don't have that where we want to be benevolent to them, kind toward them, compassionate toward them, but it's hard to be that way for ourselves. And it's weird. It's like a double standard. We would stand up for somebody else. Do we stand up for ourselves? Right? Someone quoted a teaching to me recently that if another person routinely treated us the way we treat ourselves, we would get rid of that person from our life.
Yeah.
That'd be that friend. We talked with them a few times. They kept doing it. We'd be done. No, man, whatever, no more. But we keep doing it to ourselves, right? So to me, one of the takeaways here, which goes to the whole path of practice, is how can we help ourselves on this journey? Just a little bit each day, to take the next step, to take heart in the journey. To me, that there's a kind of sweetness, but also a muscular quality of being on your own side, being for yourself, right? In addition to being for other people.
Yeah, absolutely. We're getting close to taking enough of your time, Rick.
It's been a real pleasure. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. I just noticed this thing in the book, and I had to include this because it harks to what I've been involved with Ram Dass all these years, what many of us have been. And actually, next year is the 50th anniversary of the book Be Here Now. and which he is so readily identified with. But in the book,
which I read avidly in 1974.
Yeah. Right. And in this book, though, you talk about nowness, the making of this moment. And I thought, wow, that is so connected to what Ram Dass has represented all these years. Just give us a little on what I think is absolutely necessary. And of course, one needs to use meditative practice and have enough concentration to be able to embody this. But talk about it from your point of view.
So in the book, I was really focused on what neuroscience is useful. So, and then we work backwards. We think about, okay, be here now. Easier said than done, right? The power of now, well, easier said than done. How do we actually do that? And what does it actually mean to really be here now experientially, so that we are subjectively as close as a human can be within a 20th of a second to the objective emergence of the next moment of now in the expansion, the four-dimensional expansion of the Big Bang universe, which is expanding literally in three spatial dimensions and a fourth temporal dimension. So the universe's new moments of now are being created, just like new moments of space are being created. We can't detect personally new moments of space because it's so vast, but astronomers can see it. But we can experience literally the creation of new time in the expansion of the universe. So what does it actually take to do that? And technically, a quick little useful practice for people is to help themselves train in the felt sense of the updating of consciousness, the felt sense of being alerted to the new. And before even in the next half second or so, labeling has come online, and in the next second or so, what to do about it. So something has happened. That is the front end of the processing stream in consciousness continuously, whether it's a new thought arising from inside or a new sound coming from the outside. And I find it's really useful to deliberately meditate on, and then in general, this feeling of the first half second of the stream of consciousness, in a sense, the feeling of updating, the freshness of the arising moment. It's like a mountain spring, I write in the book, coming out in the very first instant of emergence into the air. It's sort of like the very first emergence of sound or sight or thought or feeling in the moment. And as we do that, increasingly, we strengthen those neural networks. Technically, those neural networks that are involved in updating consciousness, they're called alerting networks for obvious reasons. And they're lower in the brain. They're ancient. The more modern networks that focus us on solving problems or are engaged when we kind of space out and leave the present, those are much more recent. So in effect, we are waking down physically in terms of the neuro axis, as it were. We're going deeper down into these lower networks that do alerting. And one thing about them, as soon as we're alerted, it's like a circuit breaker for the default mode network, no longer ruminating. We are no longer in the past or thinking about the future. Something has happened. Bingo. We're updating consciousness. And also when that happens, when consciousness is updated, including sometimes due to a surprise, there's a sound across the street or a person turns to you in a certain way or a sensation arises in the body. What also happens in the brain is that networks, they're called allocentric, that get a sense of things as a whole without reference to little me, to mini me. That's egocentric. So it's a kind of a 2-for-1 that's really good. When you rest in being here now, you're continually living in the freshness of the present moment before suffering has had a chance to sink roots, right? It's like breaking through the sound barrier. All that crap is behind you continually. And also, you get drawn naturally into this allocentric sense of everything as a whole, the vastness of all that is in the present continuously. Super good.
Really. Ram Dass would have loved that. And by the way, in the last year of his life, he said to me many a time, we've got to do some workshops around science and spirituality and bring in people. And this expression of be here now was exactly what he was thinking about, you know. And so, boy, I'm really appreciating that. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I want to end here with I don't know if you wrote. It's called Feeling Safer. I don't know. I think you wrote that, right?
Yeah.
You wrote it.
Yeah.
And I think it's part of the Steadying the Mind part of the book, and I think it's so apropos for right now. So you don't mind, I'm going to read it. It's very much it's a poem. It's a guided meditation. It's wonderful. It's called Feeling Safer. Help yourself feel as safe as you actually are in this moment. In this moment. Be aware of protections around you, such as sturdy walls or good-hearted people nearby. Notice that you can still be aware of your setting even as you let go of needless fear. Be aware of strengths inside you, helping yourself feel calmer and stronger. Be aware of any uneasiness, any unnecessary anxiety, and see if you can let that go. As you exhale, release fear. Let go of worry. Notice what it is like to feel safer. Not seeking perfect safety, simply helping yourself feel as safe as you actually are. Letting go of guarding, bracing, pushing away. Open to reassurance, relief, feeling calmer, more peaceful. Being aware of how letting go of fear helps to steady your mind. Very great, Rick.
Oh, man, thank you. You can read my book next time. I read it this time, but you can read it the next time.
Oh, God.
Thank you. That was really lovely.
It's an absolutely beautiful poem. Thank you for being here. Really, I really appreciate it. The thrill of doing podcasts is meeting someone like you, and it's like making a friend, and just having talk about heartwarming. So very much so. And everybody out there, you just got to go to BeHereNowNetwork.com/mindrolling. We're going to have show notes. We're going to have enable you to connect with Rick's books, etc., etc. And then I'm going to belabor Rick to come do some science and spirituality. Will you with us? We'll work out some workshop.
I'd love to do that.
We'll get some of we'll get our other friend who I believe you must know, Danny Goleman.
Oh yeah,
and I know you and others. We'll get Joseph and Sharon. We'll get them all, and we'll do that. That's I'm writing that idea down. So thanks again. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
For you being here, and we'll see you all next week on Mindrolling. Bye-bye.